Welcome to Talk the Talk, calling all activists and allies alike. It's time to come together and demand the changes we need to see in this unjust world. I'm Jordan, a Black male activist.
And I'm Kaitlin, a white female ally, and together we created Talk the Talk, a platform for speaking candidly and constructively on race.
We will provide starting points for uncomfortable but meaningful conversations and introduce new knowledge and perspective.
We will arm you with the tools necessary to combat racism anywhere and anytime you experience it.
Right now is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create lasting change to the racial and social injustices in America, and we challenge you to do your part and talk the talk. What up, Kay?
No.
Oh, disclaimer.
I was like leaning into okay, so before we get started in chit-chatting, we don't know everything and we cuss. So that's full stop. That's the disclaimer. That's all.
What up, Kay?
Hello, good morning. Sorry, I didn't mean to be a total buzzkill. I was like, if we don't do it, I literally have it typed out in all caps.
We will forget. I will forget.
You will forget. That's not my cue.
No,
that's your cue.
I'll forget. That's me. But what up, Kay?
Not a whole lot of anything. Just a lot of studying, a lot of finance work.
Oh,
financial calculator.
It just looks like a regular calculator.
I wish it were, but it is not.
Well,
it is not.
Keep getting those studies up. I'm living, man. Took a little social distance vacation, so recording in a different setting today, down in Norfolk, Virginia, visiting baby sis. Shout out Lex. But yeah, so this is really nice to get out of town. I'm not gonna lie. Despite the drive that was 7 hours, it should have been 5. Been great so far.
Being stuck in your car is still different than being stuck in your home.
Yeah, it is. It was very different. I smiled in the traffic.
I'm sure you did.
All right, so what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about implicit bias and what that means. We all have it. It's something we all have. It's something that you can choose or not choose to act on. So we're going to just take a look under the hood as to what that means for everybody and what that looks like. But first, I feel like we got a little saucy, noteworthy, I don't know if I can call it news, but
there was some bullshit.
I don't know how to
You tried to be very nice about it.
It's like this nebulous, it just doesn't make sense to me. But
yeah, when I saw it, that was just the only thing I could think of was this is some bullshit. We must talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So President Donald J. Trump has a brand new directive. So in the midst of racial and social unrest and a global pandemic that has not been under control in America more so than anywhere else in the world, an economy that's struggling, and throw that on top of an election cycle that's coming up and that is here 2 months from now. We'll have the results of the 2020 presidential election. Amongst all that, Donald J. Trump decides to put out a new directive instructing that the federal government will no longer do trainings on anything that has to do with critical race theory, white privilege, or calls into question the idea that America is inherently racist or evil.
This is all under the guise of it being divisive anti-American propaganda.
Yes.
Let's call it what it's perceived to be. Not what it is, what it's perceived to be.
He put out this memo on, I believe it was Friday or Saturday, was when it came public. And this is like an actual memo written on behalf of the president to one of the branches that's in charge of federal trainings. He thinks that tax dollars shouldn't be going towards training people on anything that has to do with critical race theory. And
literally, it says, for example, according to press reports, employees across the executive branch have been required to attend trainings where they are told that, in quotes, virtually all white people contribute to racism, or they are required to say that, quote, they benefit from racism. And they're saying that that is anti-American.
Discussing.
And that we can be proud that as an employer, the federal government has employees of all races, ethnicities, and religions. We can be proud that Americans from all over the country seek to join our workforce and dedicate themselves to public service. We can be proud of our continued efforts to welcome all individuals who seek to serve their fellow Americans as federal employees. However, we cannot accept our employees receiving training that seeks to undercut our core values as Americans and drive division in our workforce.
Wait. So us, this Talk the Talk show, this Talk the Talk community, Donald J. Trump probably thinks we're propaganda and unpatriotic. And I'm here for it. I'm all the way here for it. Because everyone else in the entire country and a lot of other places in the world right now are going out of their way and seeking diversity, inclusion, implicit bias training, and talking about matters of race in the workplace. And when all this is going on, all this change that needs to happen, he comes through and says, nah, not so fast. It's unpatriotic to discuss America being based and steeped in racism and the history of that and the way that comes into the present and how to avoid it going into our future. That's unpatriotic. That's against the core of American values in America. The America that I want to live in and the America that we're supposed to be trying to progress and get forward to, that's exactly what we're supposed to do. So just another time where he is literally flipping things on their head in order to be divisive and just not have things go in the direction that scares him and the root of his base, the people that he's talking to that don't want to have I don't know. It's just
this also, I will say to that point, this, there's two issues I have. One, the phrasing of this is there's millions of tax dollars that we pay that are going to this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing where it's okay, well, obviously, yes, if you are going to be more conservative, more times than not, that means that you are less likely to want to have higher taxes and you're going to be very upset that this is where your tax dollars are going. So that's, I think, a very critical phrase that was used. And
mm-hmm.
then I think the fact that yes, it's great, we should want to have diversity in our federal government. We need to make sure that people across the board, well, in every workplace, but particularly when you're in the public service.
Yes.
That we have people representative of everyone who lives here. So don't use that as a crutch to say well, we're not racist because we have Black people that work here. That's not being racist, but that's not being anti-racist, which I think we kind of talked about before as being it's not enough anymore to say, well, I'm not racist.
Right.
You have to be anti-racist and know what that looks like. And
I would think that this is anti-racist.
This to me is just a small little political play to drum up attention. It's just done. Jordan and I were talking about it before we started recording. Is this the best use of our time? You in theory could have 2 months left in office. And I mean, okay, so we have a pandemic going on. We have our country is literally crying right now. We have fucking problems everywhere. Protests, riots. We've got some shit. It's also an election year.
Yeah.
And this is just a BS political ploy to drum up nervous excitement on both sides of, across the aisle. So dumb. It's so dumb.
I don't think it is. I think it's a poor use of time as far as moving the country in any direction that matters. I think it's genius for him as a political strategy.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
He's not a good president, but he is a fucking amazing marketer. And getting elected, at least right now, it's I don't know any of his platform as far as like policy, because I don't think he has one. Like I've sought this out, but like he knows how to speak to the people that will vote for him.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is not, let me reach a solution. This is a political ploy.
Yeah.
To stir the pot.
Great at it. He's great at mix it up. But don't be fooled. Like there's a movement happening in this country, and there are people in this country that lead this country that stop that movement. So keep using your voice, keep using whatever platform you have, and like drive that positive movement forward.
Hey, before we like move on, how did you find this letter in case people want to read it themselves and do their own research?
So I found the letter through a Washington Post article, but you can actually go to whitehouse.gov and it's on there. It's directly on the White House's page. So www.whitehouse.gov, and you'll be able to find your way to this memo. It's under presidential directives.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure before we switched over to talk about like these trainings and why these albeit we haven't sat through the training, so we don't know, but
these particular trainings, but we both
these particular trainings. But like why they're important. So like let's get into implicit bias.
All right. So you want to tell them what it's about? Me to tell them what implicit bias is? How you want to go about this? Because it's a big topic. This is a requested topic. This is a topic that you definitely wanted to like dive into. So with that being said, I'm gonna let you kick this.
Okay. So implicit bias is something that is deep within our subconscious. There are things that we do, and a lot of times they're genuinely for survival. We've talked about like an us versus them mentality before, that like it is a pure survival instinct. If you see something that is different, you are more likely to be defensive. Implicit bias is similar in the way that like we all have opinions about things, and they could be deep in the back of our brain. We never act on them. We never necessarily even know they exist. It could be something as simple as like, if I'm walking home by myself at night and I see like a person walking down the sidewalk, I'll cross the street, right? It's something like that where like, I just do it because, hey, like, it doesn't matter what you look like I'm going to cross the street because it's safer for me to cross the street, right? It's something like that. Or it could be something so simple as like you grew up in a household where your dad or you have one, I'm going to talk about like a family that has a mother and a father for gendered purposes, but whatever household you want to live in is great. But like, let's just say like you had a father figure who was like the primary breadwinner and your mother stayed home. You could have a bias that like women should stay home. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you necessarily think it, but like it's just in the back of your head. And we need to take a step back and understand what our implicit biases are. Do they ever come out into the real life and like whatever, or do they just sit dormant in the back of our brains? And like, that is what it is. It's not bad to have implicit biases because every single person on this planet has them. Mm-hmm. The problem becomes, are you acting on those? Because acting upon those could be very damaging. That could lead to like racism or homophobia or sexism. Like, I'm not saying like if you take one of these tests that we're going to talk about and you find out that you have a preference for white people versus black people, that you are racist. That's not what this means.
Right.
It just means like I need to understand the way my brain works and how that interplays in my world, mm-hmm. and make sure that I'm aware that like, hey, like everyone is different. I am different. I have my own biases. I need to learn and understand what those are. And they can be white and black. It can be, like I said, women in the workplace, age, like young versus old.
Anything.
Anything. Absolutely anything. It's just very critical that we check in with ourselves and know what they are to make sure that we're not doing anything unintentionally to bring those forward, mm-hmm. And exclude. I'll say, I'll say this in the nicest way, but like exclude someone when you don't even mean to.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, since they are implicit, it's unconscious thoughts that can come forward in your actions, what you do, what you say, and like the way that you treat others. So it doesn't matter what race you are, what orientation you are, what age, anything, like none of that matters, because like you said, we all have it. It's unconscious, but when we recognize it, then we can take steps forward to preventing it from coming and like manifesting in our actual like physical lives.
Right.
So now that we kind of have an idea of what an implicit bias is, we can start getting into like a little deeper into why we have them. And it's like, it's evolutionary. Like you talked about when you're on one side of the street and you see someone coming towards you late at night, like you cross. And that's like an evolutionary thing. Like when we were, thousands and thousands of years ago, when you had to worry about getting stomped out by like
Yeah.
a giant predator, like you had to like be able to decipher a situation very quickly. So
Yeah.
biases are just generalizations that we use to like protect ourselves. And we don't have time a lot of the time to look at an individual and decipher if they are a threat. We have to use generalizations and associations that we have from the past. And we do that with everything, not with just with other people. You do that with like any situation. Okay. And you make these generalizations all the time. You do it again, unconsciously, thousands of times every day. Okay. So it's again, not something that's going to go away. It's understanding how to move forward from them. And like, one, you have to understand them, where they come from, what they are for you, before you can see if they're manifesting in your actual day-to-day life. And there's different ways that they come through and can manifest. Like we'll all have our own different implicit biases. And Kay, I have a question for you. I don't know if you're prepped for it. If you're not, I can go first. But talking about like, what's an implicit bias that you either have now or have had in the past, and how do you, on your own personal level, make sure it doesn't manifest, and like what lessons have you learned about that implicit bias?
Yeah, so I actually learned about like implicit biases in undergrad, and I was in like a medical anthropology class, super interesting, but basically it was like, hey, Harvard has created these tests. Again, it was a thing of like, you're going into healthcare and we're talking about different healthcare systems. Like you need to understand how you relate to other people. And that was the premise of it. So I went through and took it, and I took several of them. There are a bunch that you can take. So one of them I took was Black versus White. And I did it in undergrad, and I did it right before we started recording. And both times I had basically what it will do is for the White versus Black, you'll go through and you'll look at a screen, and images and words will flash up on the screen, and you have to associate them one way or the other. So it's like super fast. They'll tell you rules. They'll say like, okay, we've got a photo of a person's face. Here are the faces for like white or Eurocentric people. And then here are the faces for Black African-centric people. Great. So you have to toggle between those, learn those. And then they had words for good and bad. So like joyful or angry, and then you'd have to toggle through both. And then they would say, okay, great. Now that you can understand the difference between these words, every time you see a word that is like positive, associate that with the Black African-centric photos. Same. And the opposite would go for the Eurocentric photos. You do it super, super quick. It's really interesting. So I had like no preference one way or the other, but like the more mistakes you make, which you will do because it is supposed to be a quick thing, because it's something, again,
you're not thinking through, you're literally just reacting right away.
Literally, you're just reacting. So it's like the more mistakes you make one way or the other could lead you to a certain preference. So like I had no preference between Black and White, which I was like, oh, that's not really surprising. I don't think.
Right.
Like I've done it before, so I'm not surprised that didn't change. I've done, the other one that I've done a lot is straight versus gay. And I have a preference for like a preference for gay people, which is like, that doesn't really mean anything necessarily
Yeah.
because like I'm a straight woman, but like my preference is towards people of the LGBTQ community. Like that just, I mean, some of my closest friends are. So,
Hmm.
that just is what it is. Which that didn't really change either. I think like it got more extreme this time than when I did the first time.
Yeah.
And then I have another one I do a lot is age. So I talk
Hmm.
about like young versus old. And when I did the first time, I had a preference for older people, and now it's flipped.
Hmm.
So in the span of 5 years, that has now flipped, and I have more of a preference for like younger people, which I think is kind of interesting.
Because you're old now.
I'm older. I am not old. You are also older than I am. So if I am old, you must be ancient. Look, there's my bias. There it is. I like the young people. I don't like you. You're too old.
We don't get along. That's why we don't get along
Yeah.
anymore. I gotten too old.
What are some of you? I don't know if you've taken the.
Yeah, so I've definitely taken the bias, like the test, the IAT.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's implicit awareness test.
Yeah.
But I want to talk more about less of like a clinical like test result and more of like just something I noticed in my own life.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I'll go with an implicit bias to people who sought out um, therapy, which is interesting
Okay.
as someone who goes to therapy now.
Oh,
Um,
so you're saying like prior to like.
yeah, even prior to me going, but like this is probably, I'm 29 now. This is probably like early 20s.
Mhm.
Just thinking like, not thinking down on people, but just thinking like, oh, you know what? Like they just don't have the systems and like they don't have the things in place to deal with it. They might not have the people around them to talk to.
Right.
That's why they need to go to a professional, because either A, they don't have anyone else, or two, like again, this is like my younger, more mature self, they just were not strong enough to deal with whatever was going on in their life.
Right.
And I supported the idea of them going and seeking that out, and I thought that was great. But I was like, they're just not strong enough, or they don't have like a strong circle around them. And as I got
Right.
older and just got more mature in like my thinking and talking to other people that had been through therapy and go to therapy and like swear by it, not even just people that I talk to on like a personal basis, but people that I look up to, who I found out like influential people that I look up to, like famous people that go to therapy and seek it out, and like it's built into their self-care plan.
Yeah.
Started to learn like in my early 20s that it doesn't make you weak at all. It makes you like, it means that you're taking care of yourself and like whatever that means for you.
Yeah.
And that goes back to our last episode that was on self-care. And like I said last week and earlier today, like now I'm on a completely different spectrum because I've been exposed, one, to people that have sought it out, and I've sought out therapy myself. Like my implicit bias on it, one, my implicit bias changed, and like there's no explicit bias either now at this point. There's like no explicit manifestation of that implicit bias for me. Like if anything, it's like completely flipped, where like I'm a proponent that says everyone should go to therapy, or like have some
Right.
of therapy, whatever it is for them, as part of your self-care plan. And that's something I'm really grateful for. So anyone listening out there, like, don't feel bad that you became aware of your implicit bias. It's okay to change. It's okay to be
Hmm.
different in your thinking, and it's encouraged, because I say it all the time, but if you are 15 thinking the same way that you are at 25, that's not okay. If you're
Right.
25 and thinking the same thing at 35, like you should be changing and being exposed to different ideas, different people, and different experiences. So you're when you have that exposure, you're going to change. And we'll talk a little bit more about exposure down to the episode, but that was something I'm very, very grateful for. That has changed from my early 20s to my late 20s, as far as
Yeah.
this.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I just didn't even think of it in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, honestly, by the time I even met you, that had already changed, and that was like mid 20s. So
Yeah.
you had 4 or 5 years onto that, and like it's even obviously farther along. Well, so
Yeah.
again, the listeners, do not feel like just because you said or thought or did something in your past that you can't change it now and like
Right.
learn and evolve, because that's why we're here. Learn
Right.
and unlearn, right, Kay?
Absolutely.
All right. So we talked about some manifestations that can happen, that have happened in our own personal lives. We like to also talk about the big macro scale, the bigger societal impacts of the topics that we talk about. So how does implicit bias come through in the real world in different systems? So it has effects in healthcare. One that comes to mind for me is in studying race in healthcare, there is a large percentage of research that's been done that shows that doctors are less likely to look at Black women's pain the same as they would with another race of women's pain. Like they're either being dramatic or they can just handle, like, this comes from like the strong Black woman idea, like, oh, she's strong, like Black women are so strong, they've been through so much shit, like they're strong enough to handle this without this type of care or like this pain relief, or like, or on the flip, like, oh, she's being dramatic, she doesn't need that. So that's one example of how that can come through in healthcare.
I feel like also with healthcare, like for me, I think like what do the textbooks look like? So when you're thinking about something like a person who has like chicken pox
Mm-hmm.
or like Lyme disease, like things where it's like on your skin, like
Yep. Your skin
at
is
least for
going to
me,
feel
like
just like
at
the
least
rest
for
of
me, like I wasn't in advanced medical school classes,
it.
but I was like pre-med and I, had textbooks and stuff for that kind of stuff. You don't really see a lot of Black people
Mm-hmm.
as patients, which I would think would be critical to know, like, because like I said, like Lyme disease, it's like you'll get a rash that looks like a target on your skin, and I'll like that would look very different on me than it would Jordan.
Yeah.
It'd be very quick and easy to, like I'm Casper the Friendly Ghost, and I say that in a fun, I mean, it just is what it is. It would be very easy to see like a red target rash on
Right.
my body.
Right. On me, it's going to show more like purpley, or might not even really show as like, it's not going to manifest the same exact way.
Right.
So that's a really interesting point that ties us back into, you brought it into healthcare, but it goes into the education and the training for those healthcare professionals. And
Yeah.
you want to take this another direction, you can go directly into education itself. Like we always hear about implicit bias in testing, like standard testing. So if you're reading something and like there's just an experience that you as a student never had, that you have to like put yourself into for this reading, and you can't empathize because you've never experienced that. Like, I don't know, the thought of, there was one that I was like, I distinctly used to remember from junior year. I had to do an SAT course. I was doing an SAT like course to take the SATs, and it was just this theory. Not even a theory. It was just like a reading about. I think it was about polo, and it took me like 2 paragraphs to realize they were talking about polo, like riding around with a stick,
Like the game, like the
not
sport
like
versus,
water polo. Like,
yeah.
I've seen water polo. I've literally never seen the game of polo. Like, have you seen the game of polo played?
This is like really weird. Never in real life, only through oh my god, what was that show called? I'm blanking on the name. Serena Vanderwoodson. Why am I asking you? This is my implicit bias. I don't know. You don't know. Oh my god, Gossip Girl.
Okay.
That is so embarrassing. I feel like we need to edit that out. It took me so long to get there. Can you tell that I'm not a morning person? No, only in like Gossip Girl, which is like a fake show about rich teenagers on the Upper
Right.
East Side.
So if you're not like a rich teenager who like is around horses
In a fake TV show.
there, and like people playing polo, why would that be something that's in a standardized test? Like it just isn't like I was able to figure out what the whole thing was about, and like it was fine. I did well enough on the SATs, got to school, and now here we are. Look,
Here we are. It's fine.
it worked out, but that's just like one example of like things not necessarily being equitable in education. Is like the way that standardized tests are written, and that they're not written with all students in mind, and like it really does come through on on test results. Another thing is like the way that students are treated in school.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Like that's a huge issue.
It's like like behavioral things. Like I feel like we've all seen the posts on like social media and stuff, but like the way um like behavioral situations can be handled
Hmm.
at times can be very, very different
Hmm.
depending on what the child looks like.
Yeah. Hmm.
You know, there's a difference between being a problem, being sent to the principal's office, and well, you have, you know, ADHD or whatever.
Hmm.
That can be handled at times, like unfortunately at times very differently.
Yeah. And then one last one I want to add to the education piece. I think we had talked about it. I know we talked about it privately. I don't know if I ever talked about it on the pod, but when I went from the inner city school in the city of Reading to my predominantly white suburban school in Wyomissing, like I at the inner city school, I was at the top of the class. I was in the gifted program, and summer happens. I go from third grade to fourth grade, and when I go to start fourth grade, they wanted to put me in like the most basic, like remedial math and reading classes, and like my parents like, yo, no, first off,
Right.
you need to test him. You can't just put him into something because he came from an inner city school. And you think that because he came from an inner city school and he's a black boy, like he has to be in these classes. When in
Right.
fact, you want him over here, and he should be all the way up here. Like, and I took the exams, and they were like, wow, you really are smart. No shit. Like I just told you that. Like moving from one district to another didn't make me dumb and like need to like not dumb, like I'm sorry, but like
That's
it didn't make me like change what was in my head. Okay. So
that's so weird they wouldn't just test every like I would think that you would want to make sure that you're testing your students frequently and regularly to make sure you're addressing their need, like because there
you would
could be a time
that
where
sounds
you like
super
slip
equitable.
off
That
and
sounds
like
equitable.
that's silly.
Let's remember
Oh
things are
yeah.
not always as equitable as they should be. And equitability and equality goes right into the legal system, which is another place that these implicit biases can come out. I know that you like to study law, so you like know some lawyers. So you,
Okay. Do you mean the fact that I may or may not have Venmoed a lawyer friend $1 to have him on retainer to answer questions? I have a funny story that happened this week. I texted him and I was like, hey, one of my friends has a crush on this guy, but we don't know if he's married or not. Whatever. Can you look and just find his marriage records and any divorce records?
who
And
do you
he's
think
like,
you are?
huh?
Who do you think you are? Just checking in on
I'm just
people?
trying to get an answer for her.
Okay.
She
All
wanted
right.
to know. And I
Continue.
said, well, good news. I know someone in Tennessee who has passed the bar. Let's go.
Okay, so coming back
Sorry, that was my story. We should have talked about that privately.
from the Kaitlin for sidebar, do you
So
want to talk
yes, I
about
do like law. So yeah, I do like law.
how does implicit bias come through in the legal system in America?
Um, well, I think we talked about, I'm so embarrassed I should not have said that. We talked about it, I think, in like our first episode when we think about things like redlining.
Mhm.
Albeit those may be more like a slap in the face, like we know what we're doing, but for the sake of conversation, you could say things like laws are created only thinking about one type of person. If you don't know to think about others, or that you're in the back of your mind, like you have a bias that you just don't know about,
Mhm.
you could be unconsciously excluding a group of people. So when you make a decision, when you pass a law, when you set up a policy, if you're not thinking about everybody,
Mhm.
or you're not aware that you're not thinking about somebody, you could be leaving someone out, and that your piece of legislation, you know, whatever it is that you're working through, could unintentionally hurt somebody,
Mhm.
or you know, leave them at like a lesser of an opportunity than others.
Mhm.
Like, yeah,
And then
there's so many
another thing
examples I feel like.
that I always think of when it comes to implicit bias is the saying or the thought that court cases are won in the jury pool. And like
Yes.
selecting jury is literally all on generalizations and associations. Like you don't actually get to know the person that you're choosing or excluding from the jury.
You
You're
ask
just
them
taking
certain
into account, you ask them
questions.
certain questions and you look at, like, you literally just look at them. Like, oh, like this person might be too far this way or too far that way based on the way they look and the way they answered these like handful of questions. But you
Right.
don't know anything about them. And like that part of the legal system is literally built on making generalizations and associations. And it's so impactful in how a case actually comes out to play. There's been research and studies done that show that the more diverse a group of jurors is, the longer they'll spend time um, talking about
Like deliberating.
guilty or innocent. In homogenous juries, like the time compared to more diverse juries, like the time they spend deliberating is crazy different. So just
And
another.
that's super interesting because like depending on your case, like depending on your case and what your who your client is, like you may want to have everyone be exactly the same because you want a quick decision because
Mhm,
like you feel like great, cool, this is a slam dunk. I have helped my client, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like I want them to all be the same and to like and that gets interesting because yeah, like it can be advantageous to have
mhm.
everyone, if I have done something wrong, have a bunch of people who look like me in my jury, like, yeah, that's a good point.
Hmm. Hmm. And then one that I don't even know how much we need to talk about this because I feel like we talk about it all the time is policing. Um,
Hmm.
the implicit bias. Like I'll say this, I think that as police officers, you should have implicit bias training. You should be aware of the biases that you have before you are given a badge and a gun and a taser and a nightstick. You should have that before you have the authority that comes with those things and the authority of force that comes with those things so that you can be aware. I understand you have to make split decisions, but when you're making those split decisions, you should be aware of the implicit biases that you have before they come through and manifest in an explicit way.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stop there because
Yeah, no, I think I can.
that's where I'm going to stop
Yeah.
at this week.
Yep. Nope, you are correct. You are correct.
And then one place that we're starting to really see implicit bias trainings and discussions and more of a focus on diversity, inclusion, and equity is in the workplace. So I really do think we should do an episode about race in the workplace and discussing that. So we'll add that to the list. But this is definitely somewhere else. And again, there's research. If you want it, let me know. It's from McKinsey, one of the best consulting groups in the world. They've done studies in America, the United Kingdom, Brazil, Mexico, and Canada, as far as the study that I'm thinking of, that the more diverse that a workplace is, the better their earning potential is. So if you want to influence someone, you influence them with your
Show them
dollar.
the money.
Show them the money and show them that having more women on a board or more people of color on a board or specifically more women of color on a board, like you're going to retain more employees. You're going to be able to sell and like sell your products and services to a more diverse group of people. You're going to avoid the PR nightmares that you have when there's one group of people making decisions behind closed doors, and like all of that drives up your bottom line. So if your workplace doesn't feel like it's diverse and inclusive and you want to make that be a focus for your company, read through that study by McKinsey and present your argument, present the facts. It's not even an argument, present the facts that diversity and inclusion and equity will make that business better.
Yeah.
All right. And then that's it for like the ones we wanted to talk about. And those are all different ways that implicit bias impacts the world around us. So in true talk to talk fashion, we have to give you the step-by-step guides to avoiding and reducing the impacts of your own implicit biases. So we've got a little 5-step program. I feel like we always have a 5-step. We're doing something. Is this like talk to talk is like anti-racist anonymous?
Well, I don't think we should be anonymous.
No, we're definitely not anonymous.
We shouldn't be anonymous. Like that,
We're
I
all
don't
out
think that
there.
would be helpful.
But this is our 5-step program for this week to reduce the impacts of implicit bias. Step 1 is remembering and acknowledging that their bias is based on generalizations. And in order to break down those generalizations, you should see people as the individual. So the more often that you're able to do that and get past like whatever your unconscious mind is saying about what you're seeing in the real world, and you get past that and get to know the person individually, or just remember that person is an individual and will not fit whatever stereotype you have about the way they look, their age, what they're doing. Once you get past that, then you can start to get to know them as an individual. So seek that out, like be conscious about seeing people as an individual. Do you got anything to add on that?
No. I was like,
so like some like a
sorry, not a morning person.
Lighthearted thing that comes to mind is like the 90s rom-com movie theme where it's like the star football player who's friends with all the jocks and is popular, but deep down he's sensitive, and like
he finds the nerdy girl
and her bangs and her hair is up, so she like you can't really see how beautiful and pretty she is. They end up going they fall in love, and there's this whole unlocking of his sensitivity, and her confidence skyrockets. Like,
oh my god, is this about me? I'm just kidding.
Like they in that movie they both see each other, and there's not even like a specific movie I'm talking of. I've just seen it so many times that they had these stereotypes: jock, nerd, and they see each other outside of those stereotypes, and they actually get to know each other on an individual, personal level. If we all do that, take that 90s rom-com life lesson and apply it to ourselves, we'll be able to see people as individuals and not just the generalizations that they fit into, quote unquote, fit into. And then step 2 is to mindfully change your stereotypes. So go out of your way and like spend time within yourself reflecting, what stereotypes do I have on age, on race, on gender, on occupation, on any of these things, and then break those down and like go out of your way to change the stereotypes so that they're not unconscious anymore. You bring them to the consciousness and you can deconstruct them that way. And that goes
absolutely. We talked about like mindfulness last week, and I feel like this is a continuation of that. And we asked everyone to go through and think about the 8 components of wellness and how you fit into all of these things. This is another thing for like continued self-improvement. Like check in with yourself. Like, what do you think? Like it's so important to always understand who you are and what is important to you. Like not just in the circumstance of like, how do I become better and practice more anti-racist behavior, but like for each of you as a person, like I would hope that like you check in with yourself, you know what you want, you feel comfortable, confident, and healthy with, and those things look different for everyone, but like to move forward and to like go after the things that you want to live like a full life, and like mindfulness is part of it, and like this is another exercise to like strengthen that practice.
Yep. And I mean, you just kicked us right into step 3, which is to be aware and reflective. Like actually spend time with that. Spend time reflecting and being aware of your thoughts and your actions and like how those can be impacting other people around you, which is step 4. So step 4 is to surround yourself with people that are different than you, because that's the way that you're going to actually be able to break down the stereotypes. A lot of times when we have a stereotype, it's because we don't know people that fit within that stereotype on an individual basis. So when you go out and you meet someone if you're straight, meet someone who's gay, or if you're young, meet someone and spend time with someone who's old, or you're from this class of like wealth in America, spend time with someone who's of a different class of wealth. Like you can get to know them outside of the tropes and the stereotypes that we've constructed ourselves and had constructed for us.
Yeah, I feel like when I moved to the Northeast, like people were very like, and like we would get into conversations about like politics or race or whatever, because I enjoy talking about those things. it was always, oh, you're like different than I like thought you. I was what the fuck does that like? Fuck you. You're not. Like I would get so mad, but there is, and I mean, we all can agree that there is racism and sexism everywhere and
Yeah.
whatever. But like I was different. I changed like people have a stereotype of what a Southern person is and what they think.
Isn't
And
it,
like,
you know, like you said, like you got upset, you got angry, you felt a certain type of way because they were trying to force you
right,
into
yeah,
this
I was like, you don't
stereotype.
know. Yeah.
They took one thing that they knew about you. Kaitlin, all right, I don't even know your last name, but you are white and you're from the South, so you must be this,
Right,
right?
yeah.
And that's
For sure.
infuriating.
Yeah, I was just like, and you're just so different than I thought you would be. Like,
It sounds like they probably thought it was going to be a compliment. When
oh, it's
instead
like a
it was,
yeah. I'm also Southern, so like I know a good backhanded compliment. Like, don't if we want to do that, like I'll do it all day. I feel like guys do that too. Like as a straight woman, like who is like relatively low draw. I mean, like don't get me wrong, I get excited about everything, but like I don't stir the pot. I always get like, you're just like like you're just so much more chill than like every other girl I've dated. I was like, that literally is like an insult to me and every woman that you date. Like you are making an assumption that like women are crazy. Which like there probably theoretically technically will be based on like how large a population there are of
I
women in the
mean, there's
world.
guys that are also crazy, so
For sure, yeah, but
I
it's
think it's
like
just a person thing.
it's just like person, but it's like the stereotype of like the crazy girl. Like
Yeah.
you're just so different. You're just not what I thought you were gonna be.
Excuse me, what did you think I was going to be? Like
Yeah.
for me, it's whenever anyone says I'm articulate and well spoken, it makes me
Yeah.
fucking pissed. Yes, okay, let's think this through. I was an A B student in high school. I went to Temple, graduated there. I only got a fucking master's. So if I didn't know how to speak to people after 20 years of education,
Yeah.
we would have a problem. So yes, thank you for your backhanded compliment. Let's keep it moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the way like we both are talking about, you know, stereotypes that we've been put into and how that has felt. And in order to not do that for to other people, we have to be empathetic. So that's step 5 of Talk to Talk Guide to Reducing Implicit Biases. Step 5 is to be an empathetic person. Like before you talk, think before you talk. It's one of the first things that you're taught as a child. Like as soon as you are old enough to form your own sentences and start to have your own ideas, someone's going to probably pull you aside and say, little Johnny, did you think before you said that? Did you think about how that would make, you know, your friend over there, Robert or Jen or whoever, feel? Did you do that? And if you didn't, start doing that. You laughing at my fictitious names?
Yeah. Like Johnny makes like I feel like Johnny and Sal like those are kind of like Jack, Diane, like whatever. You're like Robert.
Trying to, you know, include some different.
No, I love it.
But like the whole point is like we have to be able to step into someone else's perspective,
Yes.
right?
Walk in their
And
shoes.
exactly. And it like it's hard for me to think through like not doing that because I've always made it a point to do it. So what the reason I say that is like you can make that part of yourself. Like if even if you're not a naturally empathetic person, you can train yourself to do this and like be conscious of it, even if it's not part of your innate nature. So it's something that's so important and will help you. Like it helps me all the time, even just navigating different like workplace functions, like understanding what someone else is thinking. I can communicate that to them on their level and like wherever they're coming from. So like the way that I'll talk to Kaitlin about race is not the same way I would talk to, you know, a lot of other people about race. I can be way more direct and like I empathize with Kaitlin because I know where she's at. If you're talking to someone else about anything and you don't know where they're coming from or what, like you can't understand how they need to be communicated to, that conversation is not going to go as well as it could.
Right.
So you can deliver the same message with a different method. So when we're being empathetic, like that allows us to kind of bring someone else's guard down, and also make sure that we're not going to do something or say something that's offensive to them based on an implicit bias that we have about them or the situation.
Right. And I think part of that too is just like asking questions, like show that you're engaged, that and you're curious and you want to learn. And like people for the most part love to talk. Like and they love to talk about themselves. So if you can, you know, work through that and encourage like a dialogue and a conversation
Mm-hmm.
and be willing for you to step outside the box of what you think about somebody, that a Black man can be articulate.
You know how to say work.
Like, which is just wild, you know, like, but if you can take yourself out of that and like understand because you've done all the other steps,
Mm-hmm.
like you'll have like much more enriching relationships with a bunch of different people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. So let's just run through real quick. See people as individuals. Step 1. Mindfully change your stereotypes. Be aware and reflective. Surround yourself with people that are different than you. And lastly, be empathetic. Be an empathetic human.
Just be a good human. That's what I say all the time. Just be a good human.
Easy. All right. It's time.
I think it's your turn.
What you didn't learn in class.
Woo!
So today we're talking about cognitive dissonance. And for those who don't remember from psychology class or weren't actually taught it ever in psychology, cognitive dissonance is when your thoughts and behaviors don't match up, or your thoughts and your beliefs are different than the way that the actions and behaviors that you take. So there's a dissonance there. And the reason that we want to talk about that this week in regards to what you didn't learn in class is because those can be implicit. Like a lot of times when you do have that cognitive dissonance, you can want to be an anti-racist person, right? But you can think or even act on something that is racist, and it's going to be a dissonance to what you want to be doing, what the actions are that you want to have. And acknowledging your implicit biases will help you avoid doing things that are negative and like having negative actions towards other people and behaviors. And that gap in between the two is that cognitive dissonance. So in being more self-aware and being aware of your own implicit biases, you can close that cognitive dissonance gap, and closing that gap will help you align your thoughts with your behaviors and actions.
Yep.
Got anything?
I actually don't. I mean,
did I nail it?
You kind of nailed it. I think, again, and it's just, I'll harpen back to like being aware. Like it's super aware to check in with yourself. What am I thinking versus what am I doing?
Yeah.
Versus how do I feel about this? Like
mm-hmm.
the buck doesn't stop with just like, I'm trying to be like this is a continual thing that you should incorporate like on the reg. This is something that you could be doing which sounds daunting, but it's really not, the rest of your life. It's something that you can practice and grow and understand. The more you understand about yourself, the more, like I said literally 2 seconds ago, you'll have a happier life with better relationships. And relationship can literally be your partner, your family, your friends, your neighbor, like the person at Trader Joe's who checks you out for your groceries. Like you would just be surprised at how much better all of those relationships could be.
For sure. And you said one piece in there that really stuck with me is like, this is going to be for the rest of your life, but when you put the work in, it just becomes part of your life.
Yes.
So that takes us like right into the call to action of how do we make this a part of our lives? How do we like do that hard work so that it's just a part of us going forward? And the call to action for this week is to think about your own implicit bias. So if there's something that you struggle with, or if you need to like go do one of the IAT exams, like you can do that.
I think that's a great place to start, because if you've never thought about it before, or I mean, and there are some of those like I would have never thought of. Like I would have never thought that I had a bias one way or the other for like old versus young people. Like I think like those Harvard IAT tests, just Google that. It's like a really good place to start, because It's very simple. It takes you like 5 minutes to do one of them. There's a bunch of them. You can go through, do whatever you'd like, however many you'd like, but that's a good jumping off point in terms of then moving into the next steps of how to reduce impacts of your implicit biases.
Yeah. So go either identify one in your own or take one of the Harvard IAT tests and spend time thinking about where that bias came from for you and start to deconstruct it by going through the 5-step process that we laid out of seeing people as individuals, change your stereotypes, being aware, surrounding yourself with people that fit that quote unquote stereotype, and then be an empathetic person. So go find out what it is and like do that process, and then let us know, like if you're comfortable talking about it, like share with us and share with someone that you did this. All right.
All right, love it. I'm excited about this one. I hope we get some. Also, let us know how these IAT tests go and like what you've discovered about yourself. We obviously won't, talk about it on the air if you don't want to, but like we'd love to hear like if this is helpful, if
For sure.
you learn something new, like we have all our contact info at
Where can they reach us? How can they get us?
at Talk the Talk podcast on Instagram. I probably should say Instagram, not just Insta. Jordan and I are pretty active on, both of us are active on there. What's our email again?
Talk the show.
Talk the show at Gmail. Also like and subscribe to us wherever you listen, and give us a rating. We had some folks do that, which was super, super nice.
Super helpful.
Yeah, that's basically it. We appreciate everyone for listening again.
All right,
It's
cool.
very
Let's
fun
put a
and
bow on
humbling.
that one. Look forward to some feedback and continue to grow this Talk the Talk community. Fight racism wherever you see it, and peace.
Have a great week.